Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Show, and can you believe it? There's just 6 game weeks to go now this season, and 3 of those are now confirmed as double game weeks as well. We'll be chatting about that a little bit later on. Joining us to do that and much, much more, of course, as we head into the season running, it's Az Phillips from FPL Black Box. Az, how are you feeling about it all?
Yeah, I'm okay. No chips left. Difficult period of the season to navigate, but some exciting times. 3 out of 6 double game weeks. Should be good.
And if you can be excited with no chips, imagine how you're feeling if you've got lots of chips.
People are loving it.
Right, this is what we've got then to look forward to in game week 33. We start with Newcastle against Tottenham. That's the early kickoff on Saturday. We've then got 4 matches at 3 p.m. UK time, including Manchester City at home to Luton, with Bournemouth against Manchester United in the late game. On Sunday, Liverpool host Crystal Palace and Arsenal take on Aston Villa at the Emirates. Then game week 33 concludes on Monday with Chelsea against Everton. Here's your first reminder of the show then. The deadline is on Saturday at 11 a.m. UK time. That's 90 minutes before Newcastle and Tottenham kick off. Do not, as always, forget to set your teams. But as I mentioned at the top of the show, we've had a double game week announcement this week. So let's see exactly what that means for our end of season planning. OK, time to discuss some double game weeks then. So let's bring in our guest. It's Andy from Let's Talk FPL on YouTube. Andy, welcome. Very, very exciting the end to this season. We've got double game weeks confirmed. How are you feeling about it all?
Yeah, pretty good. I'm in a better position than Az with 2 chips remaining, wildcard and bench boost. It's always nice to have double game weeks as well. Plenty of points to play for. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's a time for planners, certainly, and Az is going to have to do that, especially with no chips still in play. And we've got the doubles confirmed then in 34, 35, 37. Andy, how are you looking at this? Which are the teams that you're going to target? How are you going to play this out?
Yeah, I think for 34, the 2 teams that most people are going to be looking at are Arsenal and Liverpool. I think, at least a double up on both, probably a triple up for most people, and then a couple of other players from the rest of the teams thrown in. And then I think from 35 onwards, I'm probably going to be looking at triple Chelsea and triple Spurs, which doesn't sound great when you say it out loud, but 2 extra fixtures in the last 4 game weeks is enough for me to kind of go all in and then just kind of hope for the best after that.
Yeah, so wildcard in 35, that's right for you, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so as for someone like yourself who hasn't got the wild card left, hearing people playing wild card going for triple Chelsea and triple Tottenham actually doesn't feel too bad.
No, it's one of the reasons why I played the wild card a bit earlier, because I looked at what I'd be able to build in 35. And so I'd be taking out my Arsenal assets, my Liverpool assets, because they haven't got another double. And I thought, actually, they might actually be quite decent differentials in the final stretch, because double game weeks so far this season have been a little bit disappointing, and I'm
nearly
hoping...
as bad as blank game weeks.
I know, it's pessimistic to say, but in some ways I kind of hope that trend continues.
Yeah, no, I can understand that exactly from the position you're in. Let's have a look at 34 then specifically, and the teams who have got doubles and exactly what their fixtures look like. Andy mentioned a moment ago as that Arsenal and Liverpool are the standout options. We know that. Who else would you be looking at? Which are the players that you'd be looking to target to try and make up the rest of your team that might do well in this game week?
I think Crystal Palace have the best looking double game week on paper. 2 home games, West Ham and Newcastle. There can be goals there. It's just under the new manager, we haven't seen a huge amount from them. Which players do we get? Elise's back. He looks quite good. Eze hasn't really delivered, but has the penalties, and we know his kind of pedigree. So it might be a bit of a punt on a Crystal Palace midfielder. I also don't mind Everton's 2 home games as well. Forest, I think there could be goals in that for someone like Calvert-Lewin, and the Merseyside derby as well could be anything. So Calvert-Lewin up top might be a cheeky punt I go for.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to do something different, won't it? Certainly. I mean, just looking at those games there, Andy, do we need to be making transfers this week in game week 33 to plan ahead to 34 with how good that set of double game week fixtures are?
Yeah, absolutely. I think where possible, you always want to leave the decision as late as possible, just in case there's injuries and stuff like that. But if you've got 2 free transfers this week and you know that double's coming, then yeah, it's a really good time to set up, even if you don't play that player this week, which is something that I'm considering, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, OK. Game week 37 then. This is what the doubles look like for that. We can compare and contrast maybe a little bit with 34. This doesn't seem like as good a set of double game week fixtures, Andy. Is that how you're looking at it as well, or are you thinking differently considering the wildcards coming and you're planning for this one?
Yeah, I think on paper they don't maybe look quite as good. And I also think the teams we have to target makes it a little bit less exciting because, the best teams like Man City might rotate and stuff like that. But I also think because a lot of people have that view going into it, they're going to underrate them. And so that just makes me want to target them even more, because if we get, some good results from it, that's going to be some huge points, especially when people keep like Liverpool and Arsenal players and stuff like that. So there's definitely some risk with it, but I think it could be a risk worth taking.
What about the comparison between 34 and 37 then, in terms of people who've got bench boost? I know you're in that position, Andy. Is there a thought in your mind that maybe 34 might be more appealing than 37? What are you thinking?
The thing I like about Bench Boost 34 is you get to keep some of those Arsenal players afterwards, which obviously you can do anyway. But if you're someone that likes to go all in on double game weeks, you're probably going to ditch most of them ahead of 37. But it really depends on how well your team is set up. Now, I wouldn't go taking like a lot of hits to just have a bench for game week 34. So if you're in a position where it's not looking great, I would just ignore it, especially if you've got a wild card left, because that's a really easy way to set up for the bench in 37. The one downside to 37, I suppose, is a lot later in the season. We don't know what injuries, suspensions might be like, what league positions would be. There could just be more rotation. So there's definitely risks with going in 37.
Yeah, it's an interesting predicament for wildcarders in 35, potentially losing Arsenal and Liverpool players who've been so good. But if you had the bench boost left, would you be going 34 or 37?
Yeah, I think, again, it depends on the wild card if you've got that available. I think the bench boost in 34 does look quite good. I think we're seeing a lot of people's teams at the moment. If you've got Newcastle players, so an away game against Crystal Palace. If you've got someone like Garnacho or a Manchester United defender, they've got a home game against Sheffield United. You've got Palmer, who I know is away at Arsenal, but we know what he's been doing all season.
Yeah,
so even with these single game week players, you can still actually get a pretty good bench out in 34. So that would probably be the way I'd lean, just because of the uncertainty around 37. If you are going to target 37, though, I think you have to go hard on it. Like Andy's talking about, you load up with 13, 14 doublers and really try and attack it.
Easy to say that when you're not sat there on a wild card, and it has. Andy, thank you for the moment. We'll be back with you in just a sec. But let's turn our attention then to Manchester City ahead of their match this weekend against Luton. Yeah, it's one of those game weeks, that time of the year where we all try and do the impossible, and that's to try and predict Pep Guardiola's starting lineup. That's exactly what we're looking to do ahead of Manchester City against Luton this weekend. And to try and help us work it out, we're joined by a friend of the show, Gianni Buttice, regular, of course, aren't you, mate? Phil Foden. I mean, you sat here last week, you were so bullish about him starting, you were so bullish about how good a pick he was, and then he goes and gets benched.
Yeah, I really didn't see that one coming. He was player of the match against Aston Villa the week before. He scored a hat-trick the week before. And most importantly for me, he came off on the 79th minute, and it just looked like that early sub was a little bit of a rest ahead of the next Premier League game. And what we see with Pep historically is, yes, he rotates a load, but there's usually a select few in-form players that he does give every minute to. And I thought Foden was one of those, but clearly not. And this time of season with fixture congestion, of course, we're going to see some Pep roulette. So, yeah, perhaps err on the side of caution with some of your Man City picks, even those that are flying like Phil Foden.
Yeah, it felt even crueler for you that he goes and gets man of the match in the Bernabeu against Real Madrid and scores as well in the first leg of the quarter-final in the Champions League in the week. But anyway, the fixtures for Manchester City, Gianni, means that there is good reason to try and work out City's starting lineup, because their remaining game weeks look pretty good for investment, don't they?
Yeah, they really do. It's a sea of green and of course builds towards that double in 37. It's just got to be noted that if they do beat Real Madrid and they progress to the semi-finals of the Champions League, that's more fixtures. We, of course, have the FA Cup semi-final in there as well as the additional league fixture. So I think we're going to see a lot of rotation. Of course, they're going and fighting on all fronts and going for the title. So I still think the main men are going to be fairly safe. But no one's absolutely safe every single week. And I think Pep proved that last weekend.
Yeah, it's time to have a good bench again, isn't it, potentially, to try and cover some of these picks. The wider fixture list for City complicates matters, like Gianni said, in terms of having Real Madrid in the second leg of that quarter-final, then a potential semi-final. There's a semi-final of the FA Cup for Manchester City as well. But Kevin De Bruyne missing that first leg with illness, does that provide an opportunity for this weekend to try and target someone who you fairly certain he's going to play because he missed that game? Jeremy Doku may be the same, who was rotated for it.
It's so difficult to try and work out who he's going to play week on week. You could build a narrative around him. Maybe he wants to give him more of a rest because he's been ill. Does he come back in? I think Doku looks quite safe this week, but would I want him in the short to medium term? Probably not. I'd probably want to be bringing in players ahead of the double game week. Kevin De Bruyne has quite a lot of money. You probably have to make some sacrifices elsewhere to be able to bring him in, and then you're never going to be sure whether he starts week on week. So I think City this week are probably in a void, which is crazy when you think they've got that Luton at home game, which looks so good.
Yeah, we are mostly invested in the Manchester City attack, Gianni, with Erling Haaland, aren't we? Now, his form has not been brilliant, and is there any doubt whatsoever about owning him this week? I mean, he'll be a popular captaincy option, of course. We'll talk about that later, and it seems crazy to question him, but is there any concern there at all for you?
I mean, he did have a rest in the Premier League a couple of game weeks ago, and there is 8 days between the two Real Madrid fixtures. So I'm pretty confident. I was confident last week on Foden, but I'm pretty confident of a Haaland start. And we'll talk later in the show about captaincy, but he will be the go-to pick. I mean, as says maybe about swerving City, I think there's gains to be had even on short-term punts this week. So a Doku or a De Bruyne, especially if you're wildcarding in 34 or 35, you can afford to go for these short-term picks. A Man City versus Luton in the FA Cup, back at the end of Feb, I think it was. So not that long ago. I think Ireland scored 5 goals. And the ceiling is just huge for Man City this week. So I think risk-reward there. And I'm happy to stack up and invest in Man City short-term.
Yeah, we know exactly what Haaland's capable of. The Luton FA Cup tie shows that. But since he's been back from injury in the Premier League, he's not quite been at his very best. I mean, on the face of it, 5 goals, 2 assists in 9 games is pretty good. But when you look at that big chances column there, he's missed 11 of his 15 big chances since he's been back in the team. So he's definitely not at the very, very top of his game, is he?
No, and the problem is we're not trusting him with the armbands in these games where last season we would definitely have
given it to him, would we?
No, and he's 14 million, over 14 million. It's a lot of our budget going into it. I think he's been lucky in the sense that we haven't had a lot of other premium players to consider, no Harry Kanes of the past or other kind of players to bring in. So he's kind of had a bit of a stay of execution because we haven't needed the money. But I look at the striker spots, I think there's actually some decent strikers emerging for that double game week and for, kind of game weeks ahead. So could we go without him? I think he starts this week. Probably too much of a gamble this week.
No, I think you're probably right, to be fair. Jenny, thank you for the moment. We'll talk more about captaincy later on, of course, but it's time for a quick break now. In part 2, we have Kai Havertz to discuss, and of course, we'll also be looking at our guest teams ahead of game week 33. See you in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to the Fantasy Show. Game week 33 is fast approaching, and another reminder, the deadline is on Saturday at 11 a.m. UK time. That's 90 minutes before Newcastle against Tottenham. We're going to focus now then on Arsenal's man of the moment, and that's Kai Havertz. So, of course, Arsenal, one of the form teams in the league. They've got a double game week in 34 coming up. And Kai Havertz seems to be the man who's putting his hand up for our teams at the moment. 10 attacking returns in his last 7 matches. So, how seriously is Havertz on our radar now?
I think he's got to be taken really seriously. And you talk about radars, he's still flying under the radar. He's still
isn't he?
Pretty big differential.
Yeah.
He's now a positioned midfielder playing up front most games.
For one of the best teams in the league.
Arguably the best team in the league. So, the fact that a lot of us are doubled up on the defence, a lot of us have already got Saka in, I think people are kind of looking elsewhere. But I really like him. I think he could be a great pick between now and the end of the season. Yeah,
5% owned Kai Havertz, 7.3 million. So he's quite an easy one to get in. And when you look at his form as well over the last few weeks, he is the informed player in the Premier League. 5 goals, 5 assists, 69 points, 11 bonus points across the last 7 Premier League appearances. That's good by any metric.
It's amazing. You look at, in terms of FPL points, you look at the amount of double-digit returns he has. I mean, this is a potential captain that we've been overlooking.
A huge differential captain
all these
as well.
weeks. And when we look at Saka and we look at the minutes and, the minutes being managed a little bit, I actually wonder if Havertz might even be a better option than him.
Yeah, the price is good, the form's good, and the fixtures are great as well, aren't they, for Arsenal? Got the double game week, of course, in 34 to come up, but either side of that as well, they look good, and he's made himself an important part of the attack. Even those red fixtures, the North London derby and Manchester United away, there could well be goals in those games.
Absolutely. I think the key thing with him as well is his versatility as well. So if they do want to make changes up front to the forward line, I don't think he misses out completely. I think he just drops back into maybe an attacking midfield role, and he's still a great option there. We've seen him perform really well there for Germany.
The only question really is the fact that the Arsenal defence has been so good. So you've got a lot of players, managers now, who are looking at having 2 Arsenal defenders and 1 Arsenal attacker. You've got some who will be invested in 1 defender, 1 attacker. Is Kai Havertz the way to go? Do you take out an Arsenal defender if you own double defence and go for Kai Havertz?
Yeah, because the double Arsenal defence have been so reliable for us, over the season, and particularly the last few weeks as well. So it's hard to justify taking one out, I think, for Havertz. But if you're debating on bringing one in, I think it's a bit more of a difficult decision. The thing with someone like Raya or someone like Saliba is you don't really feel like they've got these huge points hauls in them. 6 to 8 points is probably about, you'd be happy with that.
Yeah, of course.
Whereas Havertz could get 15 to 20 points given the way he's playing. So a bit more potential on his side, I think.
Yeah, if you're chasing, he could well be an option, certainly. OK, next up, let's see what the FPL Challenge looks like this week. So, on to this week's FPL Challenge then. It's a tricky one this week. It's all about sportsmanship. So it's a different type of consideration for us maybe in FPL. Yellow cards are going to be worth -5 points and red cards are going to be worth -8. So it's probably worth avoiding players who you think might be susceptible to some issues with discipline. As you've taken a look at a team and put one together for us, and the main question that jumps out to me is Darwin Núñez up front, really? You do know that the rule this week is minus points for yellows and reds even more than normal.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad enough when your player gets a yellow card in normal FPL, let alone when they're tasked with 5. Yeah, Darwin is a risk. He's on 8 yellow cards already. I'm hoping that kind of, maybe his behaviour will be better because he doesn't want to hit that 10 yellow card.
Oh, and if you're listening, behave, please. Yeah.
But he is a risk, and you don't want to fill your team with too many players that pick up these bookings and red cards. But actually, it might mean he's a little bit more of a differential because people are overlooking him, and it's a great game against Palace going forward. So I think he could do well in this week.
And again, targeting teams who you think are going to do well because you can have more than 3. Like in the normal game, you can have 5. So City, Liverpool, you think are going to do well this week?
Absolutely. I mean, the City game versus Luton, I think, looks the most potential for big returns. And we get the advantage of we can change the team right up until that Man City deadline. So we get the team news. So we know which players we can bring in from City who are definitely starting. Yeah,
Pep Roulette out the window.
Absolutely.
What a dream. Brilliant. OK, let's round up some of the remaining questions then surrounding game week 33. Quickfire question time. Az is here, and we've got Andy and Gianni back with us as well to round up some of the hot topics ahead of game week 33. Az, first question to you. Bukayo Saka, do you think he starts this week?
I think he starts. He's started every game he's been available for. He's only played 90 minutes once in the last 9 games, though. So I think he probably gets an early sub. OK. Andy, what about Luis Diaz at Liverpool? Do you think he's a better option now than Darwin Núñez, maybe?
I wouldn't say better. I'd maybe say just as good. I think get either. They're both good options.
Yeah, they certainly are. And, of course, another double game week for Liverpool as well. Gianni, 13 points for the most transferred out player last week. That was Ollie Watkins. If you still own him, if you stay with him all this time, is now the time to sell him?
No, I think you probably still keep him. He scored on Thursday night in Europe again. He plays Bournemouth in game week 34 at home, a really nice fixture. I think you hold Watkins now.
I didn't hear that, sorry.
That's OK, Andy. Don't worry. I'll ask you another question in a moment. Az, would you be nervous about selling Son this week ahead of Newcastle away? Very nervous. Newcastle, so many defensive injuries. He could be playing up front again if Richarlison's out. I definitely wouldn't want to sell him this week. No, and Newcastle's defence has not been great either, have they, to be fair? Andy, back to you. Hopefully you can hear this one. Ryan Aït-Nouri looked great before going off against West Ham on 54 minutes. Would you advise about investing in him this week, or do you need to wait a week until Wolves double game week in 34?
Yeah, I think this week's fixture is good, Nottingham Forest away. So if Gary O'Neill says that he's fine, then I think he's a good transfer to bring in. But he is a bit of a doubt, and there's lots of kind of rumours going around that he hasn't been training with the team this week. So I think wait for the press conference today and just see. But I think he's one of the best defenders outside of Liverpool and Arsenal for 34 if he's fit.
Yeah, attacking returns that he's had in recent weeks certainly make him more appealing. Finally, Gianni, last one to you. Jordan Pickford is the most transferred in goalkeeper this week. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, he's the best performing goalkeeper in FPL this season. He's got he's got a double game week in 34, which is 2 home games. I know Andy is looking at perhaps buying Pickford. Yeah, good pick.
Yeah, OK. Interesting. So thank you for that. Thanks for rounding all those up. We're going to move it on then, and we're going to talk about how our guest teams are shaping up ahead of game week 33. OK, team reveal time. I always love this section. I love being able to peek behind the curtain of our experts' thoughts ahead of this coming game week. As we're going to start with you, this is what your side looks like then for the game week this weekend. You've got 2 free transfers. Do you have any idea how to use them?
No, the problem is I've got no money in the bank either, so
Right.
it's tricky to know what to do. We talked about Havertz earlier in the show. I do want to bring him in, and actually the Saka to Havertz move does free me up a bit of money to spread around the rest of my squad.
Why would you do that?
So if it's just Saka versus Havertz, I'd rather have Saka. But if I've got that extra bit of money to upgrade Bradley or upgrade one of my Crystal Palace defenders, for example, it might just be worth it. So I might swing that way.
So if people are in your position and they've got 2 free transfers, would you advise, if you don't need to, don't use them both, just use one, roll into next week, and then you've got 2 free transfers to attack the double?
It's very difficult to advise not using a transfer. I hate to see a transfer like completely be lost. But if you look at your team and genuinely don't think there's any changes to be made, then you might need to just burn it.
Oh, you can even burn transfers. Wow,
Might do.
that is a luxury, isn't it? Fantastic. Oh, to be in that situation. Andy, let's have a look at your lineup then ahead of the game week this weekend. What's in your thoughts? Gianni mentioned before maybe a goalkeeper change.
Yeah, I'm looking pretty strong for game week 33. And like I said, I'm wildcarding in game week 35. So I'm only worried about the next 2 game weeks, and there's not really too many moves. So I'm probably looking at doing Areola to Pickford or Henderson, ready for double game week 34. I do have Neto, who has a double as well, but it's 2 away games. So I'm just thinking maybe upgrade the keeper, leave my bench boost 34 options open. I do have the money to go from Son to De Bruyne as a 1-week pump, but I think that's more of a Gianni move than my kind of move, to be honest.
Yeah, when you said that, Jenny's eyebrows went so high they nearly hit his fringe. Gianni, I don't suppose that's something you're going to advise. But let's take a look at your team then ahead of game week 33 and exactly how you're shaping up. I mean, the 2 here are thinking of making moves that might not even affect their starting lineups for game week 33. Can you give us anything more exciting, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of flags, and if I could go Son to De Bruyne in a heartbeat, I'd be making that move. Yeah, I'm very jealous. Andy's got money in the bank.
You would make that move, Gianni.
Foden and Aït-Nouri flagged. Say again?
You would make that move.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, De Bruyne this week, I think, is a great even captain shout. Yeah, if you're confident on minutes, then De Bruyne this week is a great shout. But look, I've got Foden in place there, and if Foden starts, I'm really happy. But if I'm not confident on Foden, and we'll wait to hear more from Pep, and I will be looking at training ground photos, then I could make a midfield transfer. We've spoken about Kai Havertz as someone I really like as a Foden replacement, but Luis Diaz is my other option, and obviously both have that double game week in 34. So my move will be to roll or to sell Foden to Diaz or Havertz if we don't think Foden will be starting on Saturday.
Yeah, interesting to make that move ahead of game week 34 and try and roll into that as well with moves that might be able to set you up because it's going to be a huge double game week next week. One final question remains on the show then. Again, it's an interesting debate. Who should we put the captain's armband on? OK, time to talk about the captaincy this week. And the fact, as we're even debating whether Erling Haaland should be captain at home to Luton seems absolutely ridiculous, but here we are.
Yeah, it's another fun week for the captains, and that's one benefit of Haaland maybe not hitting the form that we saw last season. We do have this debate kind of week on week. It's a tricky one because we've got the Champions League games. It's hard to know whose minutes are going to be managed, who's going to play. Salah came off the bench last night, and you think he's well rested, won't need to be saved going forward. So I do like that with Salah, and it's a good fixture against Palace. But Haaland v Luton, when he got 5 goals against them a month or so ago, hard to go against that.
Yeah, it is hard to go against that, but people will be considering it. We've picked out Salah, we've picked out Cole Palmer as another potential option. Andy, what are you thinking? The thing with Salah, a bit like Haaland, he's still been very good, but he's maybe not quite at the very, very top of his game at the moment. Does that give you some doubt as to handing him the captaincy as well?
I don't think it puts too much doubt on it for me because these kind of players, we know how good they are. At some point, they'll turn it around, and Crystal Palace at home is a good time to do it. But I really struggle to look against Haaland this week because I think Gianni mentioned it earlier. It's a Tuesday, Saturday, Wednesday turnaround, and I think he needs goals at the moment, not another rest. So I'm probably going to go for him. I wouldn't be worried about Salah though. I definitely think he starts. So he may be even the safer option at this point.
Gianni, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we are spoilt for choice. It's some good home looking fixtures. For me, it will be Haaland, but as Andy says, Salah is a great option. Within minutes last night, he came on Thursday night and had a goal ruled out marginally for offside. So maybe there's a glimpse of form there.
Yeah, he got 45 minutes, didn't he? Yeah, another interesting debate this week, the captaincy. Andy, Gianni, thank you so much for being with us on the show as always, and good luck this week. As if you had to be really pushed to look elsewhere for Salah and Haaland, in a word, who would you go for?
We had Palmer on the screen, so
Yeah.
home game against Everton, I like him.
Cole Palmer. Right, OK. Az, it's been brilliant to have you here as always. Thank you so much for your wisdom. Thank you for watching at home as well. Remember the deadline, Saturday, 11 a.m. UK time. Don't miss it. Thanks for watching and good luck. Bye-bye.